Hey, okay, so I'm going to talk about the issue of women in politics. There is a number of things I want to encompass into this video, so it may be a little bit longer. I'm going to focus more on the UK, but I'm going to encompass a little bit other countries just to provide context, but also form part of the narrative of what I speak about. So, over the past 2 days, with the elevation of Theresa May to number 10 and speculation on who she's going to appoint into her cabinet, as I said with the last video, this is an ongoing process right now, in fact. People are being named as I speak. There has been a lot of focus on the role of women in British Parliament today. Just to give you a bit of a picture, there are currently 191 women MPs. That's out of about 650 altogether. So we're talking around about a third, a little bit less than a third. Now, I want to sort of take on the feminist narrative on this, and I should probably emphasize at this point, I'm talking about a particular type of feminism because there will be feminists out there who actually agree with everything I'm saying and who might resent me targeting the whole of feminism. Maybe that's something actually I should be a little bit more wary of, that feminism is not an entire block. Anyway, when I go ahead and explain what I'm talking about, become clear what I'm referring to with that. That there's different schools of thought within feminism. Okay, so in a fair society, in a truly egalitarian society, surely people would agree that someone's merit should be the deciding factor in whether or not they are elevated to a senior position. Whether, I mean, I'm talking about politics, but this also applies to business and other senior roles. Surely meritocracy must be the underlying theme. Now, Theresa May is well known as being a long-standing women's campaigner. That's something that stands her in big contrast to Margaret Thatcher. Thatcher was never really seen as a feminist. Um, she was. It's not to say that she never used the fact that she was a woman, because she did. A lot of adaptations of the rise of Margaret Thatcher have shown that she was very keen not to be like you know um, a shrinking violet and so on. So in that sense, I suppose you could say there was a sort of Thatcherite feminism. But she was never. She didn't particularly get on well with other women. She liked the company of men, and most of her cabinet were men. In fact, I think almost her whole cabinet, there was one or two baronesses who were at cabinet level, but I think virtually the whole of Maggie's cabinet and all the big names around her were men. Geoffrey Howe, um, not Norman Lamont, Nigel Lawson, Geoffrey Howe, um, Theon Britton, all these big figures, Michael Heseltine were all men. Cecil Parkinson, who passed away earlier this year, incidentally. But the point is, there has been a bit of a media obsession over the past few days about what Prime Minister May is going to do in this regard. It is inevitable that there will be some news about the fact that she is the second woman Prime Minister, and I have no problem with that because it is newsworthy. It is. There's no denying that. We've had 54 Prime Ministers, so she's only the second woman. So in that sense, yes, it is. It is newsworthy. But one thing I actually prefer about Tory women, if I could put it that way, is they are a lot more focused on meritocracy. On the Labour side of things, they are obsessed by shortlists, women only shortlists, which basically means you have in a local party. This is what shortlist means for the benefit of my international viewers. It basically means where a party selects local candidates. In certain areas, the Labour Party only offer women candidates, so they essentially bar men from standing. Say, for example, you're a member of the Labour Party in a particular seat, and you think, okay, I want to stand for my party. I see problems in society. I want to do something about it, so I'm going to see if I could stand. Now, the issue here is not about who gets appointed. It's about the fact that men cannot even stand, which is outright discrimination. And this actually backfired about 10 years ago somewhere in Wales, when they tried to impose an all-women shortlist, the local Labour Party wasn't happy about it because their candidate was a well-known local figure who happened to be male, and they just didn't like sort of the London Labour Party imposing this onto them in that sense. So, I couldn't help but laugh when Cameron said yesterday it's 2-0 when it comes to women prime ministers, because it's a Conservative Party. Not only have they had the first two women prime ministers, they had the first woman MP, Nancy Astor, about 100 years ago. I believe she was elected in the Parliament of 1918. So the left in particular, they're very good at preaching about this, but when it comes to actual results, it's actually the right, arguably, has more results in that regard. And I think it's because the Conservatives, and to be clear, I'm not a conservative, I'm a centrist, but I do respect the fact that they focus more on meritocracy. And to be fair to Theresa May, she might call herself a feminist and all the rest of it, but she's not appointing an all-women cabinet. It's not like she's not sending out some strong feminist statement like, "Oh, this is going to be a cabinet of strong women." She's got plenty of capable men in there as well, so it's a pretty balanced cabinet. And I would make this point, right? So if anyone's doubting my position, I would make this point. I don't care if it is a 40% women cabinet, a 50% women cabinet, or a 60% women cabinet. If it was 60%, I honestly wouldn't care a great deal, as long as men weren't being discriminated against and as long as it was based on merit. Now, granted, I don't know a great deal about some of the ministers that she has appointed today, but that's politics for you. They will get more um, high profile as time goes on, and it would be unfair to judge people on day one. So it'd be unfair to say what sort of Home Secretary is Amber Rudd going to be on day one. We can only judge that further down the line. But what I really resent is, and the media really, really drives this, and not just BBC, that Sky News was doing it as well. Someone on Sky News got on my nerves by saying that Theresa May is trying to make this cabinet more, she's trying to get rid of the millionaires and, trying to make it not look like an old Etonian club. And there's more women as well. So the insinuation there is that there's no women millionaires. Well, Theresa May is a millionaire, and so is other senior Tory women. So again, it's just an example of how the media tries to divide, and they're obsessed by it. I'm not saying it's not newsworthy. I'm not saying they shouldn't report at all about this. Of course it is newsworthy. Of course it's something to talk about. But they're obsessed by it. Like, I would say, honestly, about a third of the coverage of Theresa May's entry to 10 Downing Street has been about women in Parliament. Seriously, about a third of what I have heard seems to be about that. It's being made into like the major issue when the May government has so many other things to think about. I honestly don't think the average woman or man on the street cares what percentage of the cabinet is male or female. I really don't think they care. What they want is a government that works. What they want is a government that is effective. I really think, when Justin Trudeau appointed his 50-50 cabinet, he said because it's 2015, as it then was. That's all very well, but surely by the same logic, because it's 2016, it shouldn't matter. In other words, there shouldn't be such a focus on it, because if you're focusing on someone and saying it kind of brings about the assumption or the insinuation that someone is going to be good at the job solely because they're a woman. And that actually, ironically, is quite insulting to women, because it implies that they're just like, oh, the token woman, rather than being there on merit. Now, some of these ministers I don't know much about, but I'm sure Theresa May is thinking very carefully about these appointments. She's been entrusted to the highest job in the land. We have to respect that fact. Um, okay, I know there's a whole issue about her not being elected. I'll come on to that later on. I'm aware that was maybe a little bit of an own goal on my part. But my point is, clearly Theresa May is a very high profile politician. She's not stupid. Clearly, she's going to be appointing people based on how well she thinks they'll do the job. Um, and I'm sure Hillary Clinton will do the same thing if she becomes American president. I'm sure she will have powerful senior men in her cabinet as well, and she should do. Um, the bottom line is meritocracy must be the issue here. And when feminists obsess over the number of women in parliament and so on, if you're really driving a 50-50 quota, by the way, the country with the highest proportion is actually Rwanda. You know, Rwanda is almost automatically tied to the horrendous events of 1994, but it has a much more positive image of being the country with the most female representation. But the point is, I'm not sure what the reason for that is actually. Whether I don't know if Rwanda's got, female quotas or if it is something actually connected to the genocide, whether more men were killed in that, or I don't know what it is. But that's interesting. It's even higher than Sweden. The Amazon heartland of Sweden. I'm taking the piss off. The point is, if you are looking at someone and thinking, oh, we need that person is going to be good at the job because they're a woman, your positioning is entirely wrong. And the same applies if you think someone's going to be good solely because they're a man. Um, I do maintain that there are some areas where men and women are fundamentally different. I think it is a much more complex argument, for example, in terms of frontline combat. The reason I haven't made a video about that is because I'm not a soldier and I don't know enough about what the dynamics of frontline conflict to really know for sure. I mean, I'm a civilian. I don't know the dynamics of frontline conflict, but I do know there's a great deal of unease in the army about it. So I do think in some areas men and women are fundamentally different. Sports as well. I would absolutely 100% be opposed to a situation, say for example, in a combat sport like boxing, where because of political correctness you got like mixed matches. It would be utterly absurd. Why? Because the average man is physically stronger than the average woman. Talking averages here. Secondly, most men would hold back because most men are not woman beating thugs and they wouldn't want that image. So they would hold back anyway. And anyway, I don't want to go off on a tangent with this. I'm just making a point that some areas are gender really doesn't matter. But with politics, you know, the most important thing is what judgment someone can make. And I really think in this day and age, people don't care. That's what the likes of the BBC and Sky News need to understand, and feminist campaigners. They just can't get it into their head that the average member of the public, male or female, really doesn't care. If you took a poll in the street in any town or city in Britain and said, is it important for you that there are more women in cabinet? I suspect most people would say, I don't really care as long as they do a good job. I really, really believe that. Plus, contrary to this whole concept of male privilege, actually, the United Kingdom has a very long history of strong, powerful women, going way, way back to Boadicea, who was Britain queen who took on the Romans. We've had numerous female monarchs. Okay, that is slightly different, but there's just a lot of misconceptions going on. I think in terms of this idea that all men are privileged and all women are downtrodden. And I must admit, it bugs me when there's so much obsession by women at the top. Men at the bottom get completely ignored. The majority of homeless people, and I don't mean to go on and on about this point, but it is a factual, it's just a fact. The majority of homeless people are male. That's according to Centrepoint and other homeless charities. Their figures indicate the majority of homeless people are male. The majority of suicides are male. I can talk about many areas that men are disproportionately impacted. I'm not going to go on about it because I don't want people to get the impression I'm obsessed either. But feminists cannot say they're all about equality if they don't focus on meritocracy. If they're saying that someone is automatically going to be good at a role, the fact of the matter is there's lousy women politicians as well. There's good male politicians, lousy male politicians, good female politicians, lousy female politicians. It's entirely down to individual temperament, character, and so forth and so on. And I'm just so tired of this media obsession about this. I'm not saying that they shouldn't report it at all, but I don't think they should obsess over it because all it does is create further wedges and division. Um, Amber Rudd could be a fantastic Home Secretary, or she could be a terrible Home Secretary. Time will tell. But let's not just go on this insinuation that because there are more women, that somehow makes it a better government. Not necessarily. Sure, it sends out a good image, But that in itself doesn't automatically make. And by the way, I'm well aware there's some men who have this notion. I think it was Ted Turner that said the world would be a much better place if it was run by women. Really? Well, that's insinuating that no woman who has been in a position of power has ever started a war or been involved in a war, which is factually not true. During the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre in France, very bloody massacre of Protestants, there was a powerful figure, the Countess de Medici, I believe. um, I'm gonna have to look that up. But anyway, there was a powerful aristocratic woman who was basically the driving force behind that massacre. There has been other powerful women who have not exactly been humanitarian figures. Elizabeth Bathory in Eastern Europe. Margaret Thatcher remains a deeply, deeply controversial figure in this country. Many women inspire her, not because she supposedly let down women, but because of what she done to communities in the north of England. Um, so I fundamentally disagree that you can have this idea that, oh, if it's a 50-50 government, then it's going to be a perfect government. Rubbish. A perfect government, oh, well, there's no such thing actually, but a strong government is based on ministers and people who make the right decisions, who put the people first, and so forth and so on. It's not about image. It's not about having these quotas of, 25% black or 50% women. It's just, of course, it is good to have a diverse government. I totally understand that. And I totally agree it would be problematic if you had a 100% middle aged white male cabinet. That would obviously be problematic in this day and age. But by the same token, I disagree fundamentally with targets and quotas, and I think it's all about image. Meritocracy must be the focus because the point is, most women who are appointed to these positions are capable anyway. So it shouldn't be about the image of gender. It should be, what the BBC should be discussing now is the background of these ministers and what previous jobs have done, not the fact that they're male or female. Because this also, if you're saying that a government is better if it has, women in cabinet, by extension, you're basically saying a government is bad if it is you're basically saying that if someone is middle-aged male, let's say a 56-year-old white male, by extension they're somehow not going to be a good politician. I think that's very unfair. And there's another aspect to this actually. Prime ministers have the very difficult task of appointing a cabinet, and that means inevitably some people have to lose their jobs. Now that's politics. Politics is brutal. But what I disagree with fundamentally, and it was done actually in the cabinet in the Cameron years, is when you have capable men in cabinet who might lose their position simply to fill a quota, simply to put in a woman into that role to make it look good. That seems to me very unfair. If you have a man who is trusted by his colleagues, who is doing well at the job, by all means, if he's messed up, then yeah, prime minister has to make that decision. But that's what feminists don't recognize. It can work the other way, where you have capable men who are who lose their job simply because a prime minister or a government is trying to fill a quota. Um, and if it was the other way around, if a woman was sacked by a male prime minister, immediately feminists would say, "Oh, it's because she's a woman." They have to make every damn thing about gender, and it's always about. This also applies, and I may as well encompass this into the video. I know it's a bit longer, but it's important. I've seen a lot of reports about women feel that they are being abused online, women MPs. Now, I'm aware that there has been abuse, and there are particular areas that women get abused that men don't get abused. For example, rape threats, which, by the way, I believe is absolutely disgusting and abhorrent. And I totally support those MPs in going to the police in those sort of situations. But sometimes I do get the impression that there are some women, frankly, in politics who will use their gender as a kind of, on one hand, they'll say, "Oh, don't judge me because I'm a woman. I'm just as capable as a man." But then when they get insulted the way a male politician would be, they use a woman card and they say, "Oh, it's only because I'm a female. You're talking down to me." Male politicians get insulted all the time. The Commons is like a bear pit. And I've heard like reports saying like, "Oh, female MPs feel intimidated and is boisterous." chauvinistic atmosphere. Well, wait a second. Firstly, women MPs aren't exactly squeaky clean when it comes to being told off by the Speaker. It has happened. And secondly, and I noticed, by the way, when the Speaker done that, he was very careful to say, with all due respect to the Honourable Lady. Now, he wouldn't be saying that to a male MP. Why? Because a male MP wouldn't turn around and accuse him of sexism. So, powerful women need to also, show that they are thick-skinned as well. If you really are saying, treat me equally to a man, then that has to work both ways because male politicians have to have tough skin. They get insulted all the time, and yes, they have been attacked. Um, Around the tragic events of what happened to Joe Cox, I remember some failed male MPs were saying this is a threat we face as women. I disagree with that. What happened to her was horrible, but the insinuation was that only women are targeted. Well, 6 years ago, um, the Labour MP Stephen Timms was stabbed. He could have died. Thankfully, he didn't, but he could have been killed. It was a frenzied, vicious attack by a deranged young Muslim woman. He could have been killed. So, all I'm driving at with all of this is that we have to reject double standards and simply focus on individuals and meritocracy. I am not saying that it's completely unnewsworthy. I'm not saying that. But I think it's wrong to have this sort of thing about, is Theresa May going to have it 50%? And I tell you something, if it's 45%, the media and feminists are going to be giving her a hard time. They're going to be saying, oh, why haven't you made it 50%? Um, and it's like, in the end of the day, prime ministers have to just use their judgment to appoint the right people to senior roles. Anyway, I've spoken at length here, so I'm going to round this up. I really, really hope I'm not misunderstood by this video. If any, that's another thing. I'll just add this finally as a final point. Feminists think that if you have a problem with these sort of things, if you have a problem with gender being put before meritocracy, then you're against women in power. I'll tell you something. If I was opposed to women in positions of power, in government or in politics, I would just say that. I'm a very honest person. I'm very candid in these videos. If I had a problem with that, if I thought, oh, they shouldn't be making decisions, blah, 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 I would say so. But I don't believe that. I have voted for women in my life. I have seen female politicians I admire and female politicians I don't admire. It is entirely down to individuals, and I'm so, so sick of feminists making everything about gender. They're obsessed by it, and that's why I take issue with the Women's Equality Party. Actually, I wonder what they would have to say now that the country is essentially run by women. I mean, the Prime Minister is a woman, the Home Secretary is a woman, the Head of State is a woman, the First Minister in Scotland is a woman, the First Minister in Northern Ireland is a woman, and Leanne Wood, I don't know if she is the First Minister in Wales, but she is a senior figure in Welsh politics. She's a leader of the Welsh Nationalist Party. So no one can say Britain today doesn't have prominent women. It is full of them. So, and that's not good or bad. It just is. It's a fact. So, seriously, feminists need to stop towing this constant victimhood mentality. At least those type of feminists, I should say. Because there are right-wing conservative feminists who would say, well, that's not our type of feminism. We do believe in meritocracy. And that sort of feminism I have a lot more sympathy to. So, yeah, I'll leave it there. Let me know your thoughts.